Hi and welcome back. Continuing with my New Year theme of sketching for watercolour painting, I'm going to be sketching this Pollarded Willow, but what I'm going to be talking about is something that came up in one of the comments on my sketchbook tour, which I thought was very interesting and it made me think a lot. John said, "When does a sketch become a drawing or painting in its own right?" So it got me thinking about what the difference is between a sketch and a drawing, or a sketch and a painting. And of course, I can only give you my own opinions and my own ideas about this. But I think, in my opinion, when I use the term sketch, when I'm sketching, it's always some sort of exploration. It's always some sort of a finding out or information recording exercise. I'm always trying things out, either trying to find the right composition for some elements that I want to paint, or recording information for a future painting from a scene that I like, that I'm not sure when I want to paint, but I want to note it down. So I think, as I say, sketching for me always has that element of exploration in it. Now, this painting of mine, which is of a similar subject, another Pollarded Willow, looks much more sketchy. It looks a lot rougher than my sketch that I'm going to be showing you today. So one could almost think that it was a sketch, but in actual fact, when I set out to paint this, I knew exactly what I wanted to paint. I had a vision in my mind of this Pollarded Willow, and how I was going to paint it, the colours that I'd use, the kind of composition, tones, everything like that was kind of sort of set in my brain. All I had to do was get that image out of my mind and onto the paper. So for me, this is a painting because I knew exactly what I wanted to get across and express. Whereas in a sketch, for me, it doesn't matter how defined or finished or polished looking or scruffy it is. It's always an element of, there's always that element of exploration, of finding out, of trying things out, trying ideas. And it's that sort of fact-finding, that information gathering and that experimentation with different compositions, etc., is what makes it a sketch as far as I'm concerned. And when I've done a sketch, then I feel more prepared to then move on to a finished painting, because throughout the sketch I've discovered what I want to do and what I want to say, creatively speaking. Of course, there are many different types of sketching. You can sketch in any media, whatever medium you like. You can use mixed media, single media like graphite or watercolour paint. You can sketch in oils, pastels, of course, anything, charcoal. The more immediate, the better, really, for sketching, because it's, as I say, it's getting down ideas, it's trying things out, it's finding out what doesn't work as well as what does work. So you want your sketching to be quite sort of spontaneous, and sometimes researched as well. You can sketch plein air or outdoors in front of your subject. So that way you're trying to simplify the huge world, expanse of land that you see in front of you, into something that you can then turn into a painting. So sketching outdoors can be a really useful way of distilling what you see in front of you into some simple images that you can then explore further and turn into paintings or finished drawings, that sort of thing. And of course, it's exactly the same process if you're working from your own photographs or royalty-free photographs that you find online, or somebody else's photograph that you've got permission to draw from. Then it's that same sort of fact-finding mission. It's that same way of trying to find out and work out what's going to work in a painting, what you need to remove from the photograph in order to make it your own, in order to get the composition to work in the way that you feel really happy with, you know, the kind of thing that fits in with your style. And of course, you can always use sketching as a tool to help you if you are going to or planning to paint from your imagination. Unless you're just experimenting and want to go straight to paper and paint, if you've got some ideas of what you want to paint, it's quite often a good idea to do some thumbnail sketching of what's in your mind and your imagination, and just testing it out on the paper and to see if your ideas actually work in a composition, and if they don't, to maybe tweak the idea slightly until you get the composition and the tones to balance and to work. So coming back to the idea of when does a sketch become a drawing or a painting in its own right, I'd argue that once you finish with the sketching process, then you move on and you use your sketch to create a painting in its own right, having solved most of your problems with the sketch or sketches, because sometimes it takes several sketches, maybe a sort of a thumbnail sketch, a tonal sketch, and then maybe one actually using paint. If you're going to do a painting, then I would say it's at that point when your sketch will turn into a painting, is when you've finished and you're happy with the sketching process and ready to move on to make a finished painting. Now, with this Pollarded Willow sketch here that I'm working on and showing you, my original intention was to make the sketch reasonably simple and then possibly go in with ink on the top, and then maybe even with paint over that, and so turning it into sort of a mixed media line and wash and graphite sketch. And that's why I'm sketching on Saunders Waterford hot pressed watercolour paper in preparation for painting, and it's taped to my board ready for painting. And but the more I got into this sketch, the further I went with it, the more I enjoyed the sketching process, and I didn't want to stop with the pencil. I wanted to continue and get all those nice dark tonal values in and explore the composition. I've also really simplified the photograph too that I was working from, which came from Pixabay. I've only used a very small part of it. The photograph I'm using has an avenue of these pollarded willows on a riverbank, and I've just taken just the one, and I'm focusing on that because that was the composition that I decided in my mind that I wanted to work at. So here I'm using a large DIY store carpenter's pencil. It's the kind of huge big pencil that carpenters use to mark out measurements and things on wood, etc. So it gives me a nice broad mark if I hold the pencil one way, and if I hold it another way I can get finer lines from it. I can also get quite nice dark marks, because while this pencil is not graded as it came from a DIY shop, I'm pretty sure it's somewhere between an HB and a 2B, so it gives me a reasonably dark mark. If I press quite hard, if I press lighter, it'll give me obviously quite a good range of different tones of graphite as I draw. And later on I'll use a couple of other pencils, and I think it's an HB ordinary wood case pencil, and then a 5B wood case pencil for my really dark darks at the end. The photograph that I'm working from, that I'm using as inspiration for this sketch, has this large stump of willow with the smaller offshoot of a tree in front of it. Both trunks are very, very dark, but there are some lighter branches that are coming up from the smaller tree stump at the front across the pollarded willow itself. And I'm looking to try to get that sort of effect. So I'm building up my darks quite slowly, because once I've got enough darks in the pollarded willow stump, then I can use an eraser pencil, hopefully, to erase out some paler marks for showing the branches from the front tree going across the back tree. Pollarded willows are very sort of statuesque and strange things. I think it's a way of keeping the trees sort of trimmed or pruned or sort of managed, so to speak, that every couple of years I think they're kind of cut right back to this stump, and then they send out these long straight shoots, multiple long straight shoots, which kind of stick up towards the light, and then they become obviously covered with willow leaves as we come into spring. But I'm sketching this as a winter tree with no foliage, so it's just these very stark branches growing up from this kind of very deformed tree stump that is really interesting me, and I'm trying to get it to work well as a composition. Hopefully you can see now where I used my Kohinoor Hardtmuth eraser pencil to erase through some of the graphite, and then to go back round with the dark pencil sort of around that lighter area. It looks like those paler branches coming up and twisting round in front of the tree. I had a feeling that this would work, and I'd hoped that it would, but I needed to explore that theory on paper, just to make sure that this would be an effective way of getting those branches to kind of contrast against the dark background, and get them to show and get some kind of sort of depth of field here, so that you can see that the smaller tree is in front of the pollarded willow. So I'm just taking out with my eraser pencil, I'm taking out a few bits here and there in other parts of the tree, just to add more complexity and layering, so that some parts look lighter, and then I can really build up the dark between those lighter areas. Excuse me. So this is another one of the reasons why I distinguish between sketching and drawing, or sketching and painting. It's trying out different ideas, trying to problem solve, trying to make sure that ideas that I've got actually work in practice, and if they don't work, trying to find a different solution to that problem, that creative problem, trying to find a different way of creating that same kind of effect. Now, of course, you can do the same sort of thing straight in watercolour. It's very often a good idea, if you've got a composition or an idea that you haven't tried before, just to use the back of an old painting and just to make sure that it works, that your colours work together, that your tones are right, etc., etc. And it's a good way of problem solving. If you watercolour sketch on the back of an old painting or in a sketchbook, you will maybe realise that the colours that you decided you wanted actually don't work together, so you might have to rethink a couple of them, or the position that you decided you wanted elements to be in is over complex, so you need to simplify a little bit further. So again, whatever medium you create in, it's sometimes a really good idea to get in the habit of sketching, problem solving, gathering information, and working through those problems to make sure that your ideas are going to work when you come to actually do a finished painting. And at this stage, I've just about finished my sketch, but here's my 5B pencil, nice and dark, nice soft lead. And as I've decided not to work into the sketch with ink, just to keep it as a graphite sketch, I want to use this lovely 5B pencil to get some really good darks, just to finish off this sketch. I really enjoy pushing tonal values as far as I can, so the darker something is, the lighter areas will look next to it. So if I can really get in some nice darks, it should push these branches forward even more, the lighter ones in the front, and just give me that added sort of dimension to the sketch. I'm being careful here not to overdo this, because these dark accents are what's going to make the sketch really pop. So once I've got these last darks in, then I think that that's me just about done for this sketch. And I'm liking the way it's looking at the moment. I think it's going to be a really useful information sketch for my painting. Just putting in a little bit, defining that far riverbank gently behind the willow tree, just to sort of bring the painting together a little bit more. So that's my finished sketch pretty much. I think if we zoom in and have a look at it closely, you can see that it's quite scribbly, it's quite sketchy, but I've really worked hard to kind of keep those lighter branches coming out in front of the darker masses of tree stump behind. Well, I hope that was helpful, and I hope that's sort of put across my opinions about what makes a sketch and how it sort of is different from a finished drawing or a finished painting in its own right. So thanks so much for watching. Please leave us a like if you enjoyed the video, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And thank you so much to my lovely Patreon group, where we've got a loose sketching series that I'm currently working on, among other things. So I'll see you again soon, and I'll be back painting next video again. And happy painting. See you soon then. Bye.